There we are. All right. Good afternoon, Ms Banerjee. Thank you for joining me on the ninth episode of One to Come Up, where we go over your entire career from the beginning to the present day and end up looking towards the future. So thank you for joining me here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Pleasure to chat with you.
Yeah. So could you tell the listeners a little bit about your company, Clear? Because
Yeah,
some people might use it, some might not. But just before we get started, so everybody knows what's up.
yeah, absolutely. So clear, we're a Y Combinator backed beauty tech company. We have a free skincare routine tracking app. It works very similar to a period tracker or a diet tracker, except it's a skincare tracker. So you can log the skincare products you're using, any medications, if you take any for your skin, and you can take progress pictures. We then analyze how your skin is changing based off of those pictures, accounting for the products that you're using and other parameters like your skin type, your skin concern, your skin color, because that also matters when it comes to skincare. And we use all of this data across our community of tens of thousands of people across the world to make unbiased product recommendations for consumers.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. I think I might have to join it,
Yeah,
myself.
it's completely free. I'll make sure you scan the QR code at the end.
All right, cool, and I'll include that for the any listeners who might be interested. So, Ms. Banerjee, typically I like to start the podcast going back to your college days,
Mhm.
because that's where I'm going into. That's generally where my audience is. So, it's pretty interesting with you because you started off as in physics at the Imperial College, and then you've kind of gone into the beauty sector. So, if you could tell the audience about your college's experience, I think they would find that very interesting.
Absolutely. And for me, I think it actually starts a little earlier, because for me, physics wasn't just something that came up. It wasn't so much this, oh, I have to go to uni now, I have to figure out what I want to study. I had my eyes set on a career in physics for a long time, from about the age of 14. And so I think for me, ultimately, when it came to my career, my choices were shaped by quite a big life experience that I had when I turned 14, and that was moving from the UK to India. And I'm British Indian, so I'm of Indian origin, but was raised in the UK and kind of more culturally British. And when I moved to New Delhi, it wasn't just a big move in terms of geography, but in terms of how my life changed. I went from a regular state school in the UK to now an international, it was actually an American school in Delhi. So all of a sudden my teachers were American, my classmates were American. It was a very nice private school, which was a huge contrast from my school in the UK. But the other thing is, India is a country of such extremes. So while I was experiencing a life of privilege like I had never experienced
Yeah.
before, I was also seeing poverty on a level that I'd never seen it before. And I think being of Indian origin, I found it hard to separate that because I looked like, the other people, many of whom were suffering. And I'd always just wondered, like, what did I do to deserve this life? Why was I afforded these privileges? And I think it was at that point that I kind of made a vow to myself, and I felt a great responsibility that, well, I've been given a great education. I have a loving, supportive family. I've been blessed with good health. I have to use my education to do something of impact and add some value to this world somehow. And at the time, I thought the best way to have an impact was through science because technology is what drives innovation. And so that was kind of what laid the foundations for me to want to study physics because, you know, I believe that physics kind of underpinned all of the sciences. And with physics, you learn how to code. So if you want to go more into the software side, you can also do that. Or if you want to do more theoretical physics, I think there's just so many applications. I thought that's how I could kind of give back to the world and have my impact. And so I was delighted when I went to university to Imperial to study physics. It's one of the best universities in the world for physics. But when I got there, it wasn't quite what I expected it to be. And to put it sort of succinctly, I think I hadn't really thought much about the day-to-days of a career. I'd looked at it very philosophically of, this is the broad impact that you can have with physics, but in terms of the timescales of the impact you're having, or in terms of, the day-to-day, how much time are you actually spending doing the physics versus the admin work and applying for grants. And, I didn't know an awful lot about the realities of a career in academia. And the more that I learned, the less I felt that it was the right fit for me. And so in the first year of university, truly, I had a bit of an existential crisis because I'd spent the last, 4 years hardcore, believing that I would be a physicist and feeling this deep sense of responsibility that I had to do something useful with myself. So all of a sudden, to have that thrown off course was a little bit of a shock. And I just thought, well, if it's not physics, what is it? Like, what am I going to do? And so I just decided to start applying to every internship I could. And I was lucky that I went to university in London where there are so many industries. You have all the tech companies, the law firms, the investment banks, the NGOs, whatever you want to do, you can. And I really didn't know anything about any careers at this stage. And therefore, it was almost with a vengeance. I was just applying to everything to try and learn as much as I could. I was really lucky in my first year of uni. I landed a spring internship at Morgan Stanley, which is an investment bank, and it was in their software engineering division. So that was a fantastic insight into what is the job of a software engineer and also what is an investment bank? Like, what is this world of finance and economics? Because I knew nothing about that. And when I did that internship, I thought, okay, well, I like writing code. I like bringing ideas to life. But I think I'm actually more interested in the transactions and the companies and like, the reason we're writing this code. And so then after my software engineering internships, I started applying for banking internships and I did some of those and I kind of reaffirmed the belief that, yeah, I'm definitely more interested in the company dynamics than I am in the pure software engineering, but I'm happy I have the skill of writing code and it's a useful tool to have. Then in my third year of university, by this point, I'd done quite a few internships in different fields. I got a cold message on LinkedIn, and it was from a student at a different university. And he had come up with a startup idea and was looking for somebody with three very specific skills. One was someone that could code and build a platform for him. The second was someone who was at a London-based university because the target market were students, and there's a lot of unis in London. And the third was somebody who had connections to the HR people and the recruiters at all of the big companies, because this was a recruitment platform. It was kind of in the HR tech space. And because I'd done so many internships, I had those relationships. So I said yes to this without knowing anything about entrepreneurship, without knowing anything about this guy. And it turned out to be the first job that I completely fell in love with. And it was sort of from two angles. Selfishly, it was the first job that I got to do a bit of everything I loved. Some days I was writing code. Some days I was throwing events for students. Some days I was going to these swanky offices and pitching the HR people. I loved that I was learning about all of these different areas. But coming back to that impact point, I always knew, as I said, that was kind of the most important thing to me in my career. And this was the first job that I did where I could so directly see the impact I was having. I still remember that first feeling of seeing somebody that I had brought onto the platform that I had built actually secure a job for after they were finishing uni. It was such a validating feeling knowing that I'd used my education to build this platform, to get the employer on board, to get them to sign up and deliver something of value. And so realizing that I could have this feeling from my career was such a game changer and completely shifted my mindset and made me realize this is what I want to do. This is how I can have my impact through building a tech company. The challenge was that I did all of the operations for this company. The one thing I didn't do was raise capital. It was a family funded business. And I didn't see myself starting my career specifically in this company. So my career plan at that stage was, well, I'll finish my degree. I'll take my graduate job, which pays quite well. I'll save up as much money as I can, and I'll use that to fund the business down the road. Because, at that point, I was a student, I was 20 years old. I didn't know anybody that had raised external funding. I don't come from a family of entrepreneurs or great money. So I didn't think that, I didn't have another route to capital, basically. And so that was the career plan. I had graduate jobs secured for when I was going to finish university. But then COVID threw a bit of a curveball because COVID hit in my final year of university. I was on a 4-year integrated master's program. In the UK, generally, degrees are 3 years, but mine was 4 years. And because I had secured my graduate job upon finishing my degree, there was kind of not much career stress because I had a job secured. And because of COVID, all of my extracurriculars and societies were cancelled. So I found myself with a lot more free time. And I thought, well, if one day I want to start a company, why not start working on something now as a side project? And there's no pressure. It doesn't have to go anywhere. It'll just be a learning experience. And then long story short, and I'm sure we can dive into this more, um, I started working on Clear, and Y Combinator ended up investing in Clear when it was at the idea stage. It was just a 4-day-old idea. I was halfway through the final year of my degree when they made that investment. And that led to me actually dropping out of my master's program, turning down my graduate jobs in finance, and starting to build Clear full time in 2021.
Yeah, certainly. That's a very interesting experience that you had with Wine Combinator, and also your college experience. And I didn't realize that it went even back further than I had explored, and into your childhood, that it all kind of came back and culminated for over a 10-year process almost. So that was
Mhm.
really interesting to hear about. So yeah, so now we're at the point where you were in Y Combinator, and you also had started like a previous company that you had submitted to Y Combinator, and so that was like kind of an interesting time there to get into Y Combinator. So could you explain that time and also Y Combinator for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I mentioned, I wanted to start something as a side project in my 4th year. And actually, I didn't start with Clear. And the reason being is that I was given advice by an investor that as a female founder, I should stay away from beauty. Because really, I wanted to build a tech company, and that's what Clear is. But it's a beauty tech company. And sometimes when you associate beauty or lifestyle or wellness, especially as a woman, you're not taken seriously because people see it as just a beauty company. They don't see it as a tech company. And so I was given this advice and I thought, okay, I'll take it on board. I don't really know any better. And so I came up with a different idea. And the idea was an AI note-taking app. So completely different. And that's what I actually applied to YC with. And I didn't expect anything from Y Combinator. I must have submitted about 200 applications for different
Wow.
fund opportunities. And this has been my approach to everything in life. Going back before my entrepreneurship or entrepreneurial activities, even when it came to internships, I would apply for 100, I'd get one. And it's the one that matters. It's the one that you need. Um, so I sort of took that same approach and mindset for when it came to funding opportunities. I applied to all of them, got rejected from almost all of them. But Y Combinator came back saying that I had an interview for Quill. That was the name of this company. And I kind of couldn't believe it. It was amazing to even get to that stage. And I was super excited, but I was also slightly terrified because, to put it very crudely, Quill wasn't a great company. There were several things wrong with it.
It was your
Um,
first.
yeah, well, second if you count the first one I did while I was an undergrad.
Uh,
But yeah, that there were several key problems. Some of them were quite funny. Like, it was an AI note taker. So the first step of note taking is the voice to text, the transcription.
yeah.
The problem is that the transcription engine was trained on an American speaking data set. So it would work with your accent. It
Oh
didn't
wow.
work with mine. So what this meant is when I would do user demos, I'd get on a call, I'd say, oh, hi, Danny, it's nice to meet you. So we're just going to turn this tool on, and then we're going to talk totally normally, and it's going to transcribe all of our notes right here. And I would have to bake an American accent for the product to
Wow.
work. And I was absolutely like, it felt like a joke, I was like, gosh, what if we ask for a demo? Do I just pretend I'm American? Do I just say I went to an international school? Do I just say I watched a lot of TV growing? Like, how do I explain this weird like personality switch? I was just like, there's no way this is how real companies are built. Um, but again, just coming back to that impact point, the whole reason I wanted to build a company was to feel like I was having an impact. And I just didn't have that with a meeting notes app. But on the flip side of that, I was also terrified of telling Y Combinator any of this because, they'd taken the written application seriously. So I thought it's 10 minutes of my life. Let me give the best interview I can. And I'm not expecting this to materialize anyway. So I do the interview and it's a 10-minute long process. It's very short.
Yeah.
Then 3 to 4 interviewers, they cut each other off, they cut you off. It's very aggressive. And you get an answer the same night. So within 24 hours, you'll hear if you're successful or unsuccessful. Generally, if you're successful, you get a phone call. If you're unsuccessful, you get an email. Also, because it was COVID, it was all done in Pacific time. So my interview was at around 10 o'clock, and I had to be available until 4 a.m. in case they had any follow-up questions. So I do the interview, no idea how it's gone. Like it's just such a quick, sort of rattling process. And I'm not expecting it to work out, but of course, there's that small part of you that's hoping for a phone call instead of an email. And about 2 hours go by and I get the first email notification and my heart sinks a little bit, but it's not a rejection. And it's actually like a clarification about my degree because I was still a student at this point. So I answered that question. Another roughly like 2 hours go by, another question. How married are you to this idea? I thought, okay, it's a weird question. And my answer was, well, because bear in mind, I'd been having some doubts. I just said, look, I don't think there's a market leading solution in this space, but if I am better suited to solve a different problem, then I will pivot. And I just sent that back. And then at about 4 a.m. my time, I got this long email. And the crux of it was essentially, we like you. You've made quite a lot of progress in a short amount of time on Quill, but we don't like your idea. So we want to talk to you again in a week, come up with something better. And so I now had a week alongside my studies. It was my final week of term. I had all of my master's thesis deadlines that I had to kind of just pull a new company out of my back pocket. And to be clear, I didn't have anything of clear at this point. I had fully committed to working on Quill. But I just thought to myself, what have I learned from these 2 startups I've worked on? And the first thing is, I think it's a good idea to solve a problem that you've experienced. And I've had so many skin issues all through my teens, still into my 20s. It's so hard to know which products to use, to know if they're working. I've seen different dermatologists in different countries, and the whole system is a mess. So I understood the space really well. But the second thing was, what solution can I build better than anybody else? And that was the thing that was missing from Quill. There were many software engineers that could build a better AI note taker than I could. But how many skincare enthusiasts are also software engineers and can build the best skincare tracking app? So really, it was only 4 days between my 2 interviews. And in that 4 day period, I made more progress on what is now clear than I did in the prior 4 months of working on Quill.
Wow.
And then I pitched clear to Y Combinator. And after a very long-winded conversation the second time around, the interview ended quite abruptly. And the interviewer said, okay, well, the batch starts in 2 weeks, incorporate a company in the US, open a bank account, leave your degree. See you then. Do you have any questions?
Wow.
So as you can imagine, I hadn't slept in 4 days. I was dazed and confused. This was all like in the middle of the night as well, London time. And I had basically just gone from being a student to like that, having to leave my degree, turn down my graduate jobs, and start my life as an adult, building my own company, going through Y Combinator. And for those of you who aren't too familiar with Y Combinator, it's a startup accelerator program based in San Francisco. And it's 3 months long. During that 3 month period, you get mentorship and guidance from some really prolific founders who built amazing companies themselves. And at the end of the 3 months, you pitch your company at an event called Demo Day. Demo Day is essentially a convention of the top Silicon Valley investors. And generally, that marks the start of your funding round. So ideally, during those 3 months of YC, you've experienced the best growth of your company's trajectory in the early stages. You pitch it, you have access to the best investors, and then you go on, raise more capital, and then you're on that trajectory to unicorn, you hope.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was an incredible experience, an incredible program. And to put it bluntly, without YC, I wouldn't be here. I think it's very hard for somebody like me without any connections, without any, I don't know, unfair advantage to raise funding. As a 21-year-old woman based in the UK,
Yeah.
it was very, very hard for me to even get on a meeting with an investor. So the fact that Y Combinator invested $125,000 in my company when it was a 4-day-old idea and I was still a full-time student is unbelievable in many ways. And it was life-changing for me. And I'm super grateful for that investment.
Wow, that's amazing that they told you drop out of university, leave your degree, and come to San Francisco. So now you're the first person that I've had on the podcast to have gone through Y Combinator, and I understand it's a seed accelerator, but what is that, a seed accelerator? I understand what it is, but like, could you maybe go through what they do for you, and
Yeah.
that 3 month period?
Yeah, so as I mentioned briefly, you have access to basically the best startup mentorship possible. So there's some structured programming, I'd call it, which is kind of like a curriculum. They go through the basics of building a company. So what metrics should you be tracking? How do you conduct user interviews? How do you develop a product development process? How do you hire the right people? How do you fire the right people? When do you know is the time to fire an employee? Basically anything you need to know. And often as founders we get so caught up in the excitement of our ideas and what we're building, but there's a lot of business fundamentals about how do you raise capital, how do you put a pitch deck together, like all of these things that you kind of need somebody to tell you. That's exactly what YC does. And it's normally the best advice because it's from really experienced people who have themselves built companies and have seen thousands of companies go through the program and have seen what makes a successful company, what makes a less successful company. And so you have quite structured mentorship during that period. You get assigned group partners. These are kind of your go-to resources for anything. So any question that you have, no matter how specific it is, if it's, about your industry or if it's very personal or, you're having a team conflict, you can go to them about anything. And, building a company can be hard and lonely. When you have YC as an investor, it's still hard. Building a company is never easy, but it's a lot less lonely because from day one, I've been so lucky to have access to an amazing community of not just group partners, but even the other companies. A lot of the other founders are second-time founders, third-time founders, people that have already built companies. So again, from day one of my career, I've been able to have some of the most amazing people as resources that I can be open and vulnerable with and ask my dumb questions to. And to have that is a true privilege. It's an amazing community to be a part of. It's not just the funding, like with a lot of investors, it's the whole ecosystem that comes with it. It's a brand name in the same way that, going to an Ivy League, for example, will open some doors. It won't guarantee success. I see YC as kind of the same. Being a YC company does not guarantee success in the same way that going to Harvard does not guarantee success. But it opens doors. It gets your foot in the door. It will get you that job interview, if you're at an Ivy League college, or with YC, it might get you the investor meeting. It won't guarantee the investment or the success down the road, but it's a recognized brand in the ecosystem. And that in itself can be really powerful because the ecosystem is so relationship and FOMO driven.
Wow, that's very very cool to get some insight there into Y Combinator, and that really clarifies some things for me about how it is. So where do they leave you? Because I know you at that time at that end point you had raised like $1 million. So
Yeah.
where does Y around $1 million? So where does Y Combinator kind of leave you, and what did you do in these few years? It's only been a few years since you started it.
Yeah, so yeah, immediately after YC it was fundraising, and that's where I did my funding round. And after that it was hiring. So the key hire there for me was our CTO, because before then I was leading the tech side and I can code. I have a software engineering background. Do I consider myself a good engineer? No, I am an engineer, a very average one. And so we're a tech first company. There's a lot of innovation required in the app itself. And so the first sort of big milestone was actually hiring in our CTO after raising funding. And then since then, it's really been about the product and the industry recognition and impact. So we are a skincare routine tracking app, as I said. The challenge for us is there is no market leading skincare app. There are market leading period trackers, apps like Flow and Clue. There are, apps for runners and cyclists like Strava. There are calorie trackers like MyFitnessPal, all of which have big valuations. A lot of them are traditionally venture backed. And that was the model I was going after. I saw Clear as the Strava for skincare. Now, there is no Strava for skincare yet. There is no great skincare tracking app yet, which meant that there's no app we can copy and paste from. You have to go through the painstaking process of releasing a feature. You design it, you code it, you analyze the metrics, you conduct user interviews, you understand what people like and don't like about it, and you keep repeating this process until the app is good. And our definition of app is good is retention. So are people coming back to it because that's a sign that they're deriving value from it, that we're having an impact on them. And there's no shortcut, I think, when it comes to product development for a new innovative product. You just have to be diligent. You have to be honest about the metrics. You have to be able to hold your hands up if you release a feature that doesn't hit. And it hurts if you've invested time and money and effort into building something and your users don't like it. But you have to be able to be honest about it and move on and revert your changes if you have to. And so for really 2 years, that was the sole focus, was really just getting the app good, frankly.
Yeah.
And when you focus on product, you experience what's called product-led growth. When a product is good, people talk about it. They tell their friends it's organic. So because I had this approach for the company, we didn't do any marketing. We still haven't invested $1 in our marketing. It's all
Wow.
organic growth because we built that strong user base of people who love the app. And this is really the YC mantra, that their whole thing is build something people want. That's what they tell us
Yeah.
as founders, because that is the way to build a successful company. You have to solve a problem. And the way to do that is write code and talk to users. That's kind of like the second mantra. And that's what we did for 2 years. The good news is last year we started achieving a lot of those product metrics, but also started gaining a lot of industry recognition. We won a beauty tech competition from L'Oreal. The App Store featured us as one of the best new apps, which was surreal. They don't tell us this, like there was no process to it. One day we just saw a spike in our US users and I was like, what's happened? Like, what have I done? And so I reached out to them on the app. I was like, how did you find out about this? And they're like, yeah, it was just on the App Store. And because I'm in the UK, I can't even see the US App Store.
Oh,
I had to like change my location settings. I have a cousin in the US. I was like, can you like go to this part of the App Store, please? And lo and behold, the US App Store had featured it. They didn't tell us as the developer. And so, we started seeing some of these accolades and recognition, and the growth just sort of went from there, really. And so now we're in a really cool phase of the company where it's about the growth and the impact and what else can we do, and also focusing more on the business side rather than the tech and the product. And what that means for us is monetization. And that's also very interesting because the app is free for users. The way we make money is we work with beauty brands and we help them get consumer feedback. We run product testing programs similar to clinical testing. So a brand can say that, okay, Clear, we're launching a product targeted for people with oily, acne-prone skin. Can you get us 5,000 women in the UK aged between 25 and 35 with, they can be even more specific, brown, oily, acne-prone skin? And can they use our product for 8 weeks? At the end of the 8 weeks, we want to be able to use their before and after pictures and product reviews in our marketing, in our R&D, to basically see if they like it or not, if we need to make any adjustments. And we'll run that program for them. So it's kind of a win-win-win. As a user, you sign up to a free app and you're rewarded by getting free skincare. And some of the time it's like pre-launch stuff. It's really exciting. All you have to do is use it. You don't have to say you like the product. You're not being paid to be an influencer. You're getting a free product to give honest advice. And if you hate
wow.
it, you have to say that you hate it. For a brand, you currently don't really have good ways of getting unbiased consumer feedback, right? Like, and that's so important because let's say a brand has a really terrible product and then they launch it to the market, but they don't know that it's terrible. They're going to take the hit on sales. if they had done a little bit of testing beforehand to know, okay, maybe the fragrance is too strong and consumers don't like that, they could have tweaked it, they could have launched a better product, and it could have made more sales. There's basically no infrastructure in the beauty industry today to do this until Clear. So for the
Oh,
brand, it's a win, and for us, we charge for it. So that's where we win, and we're happy to have this impact because the app isn't just about helping consumers use data and science to make better decisions. It's also about helping brands use data and science to make better products.
wow, that's super cool because I never thought I always think how did like free apps make money, and now I kind of know one way that it's not even just a beauty app or a technology app anymore, but it's also like kind of a consensus app.
Yeah.
Um, so you had mentioned several times here that you had just mentioned like Y Combinator. Another like subset of that is like learning how to code. Do you think for other areas like maybe the healthcare industry, or I'm interested in finance and business, do you think that's gonna be like a necessary skill set to know how to code in other areas, or?
It's really tough to say, Danny. I think 2 years ago, I would have said absolutely. It's an amazing skill to have because it empowers you to bring an idea to life, which is huge. But with the advancements of LLMs, tools like ChatGPT, even now for a non-technical person, you can make a start to coding. And of course, if you know how to do it yourself, you don't have to be reliant on these tools and you have a better understanding of what it's spitting out. But I think that maybe the way of looking at it is, yes, it's still as valuable to know how to code, and it's easier than ever to learn how to code, which is all the more reason to do it because you've had such advancements in these tools. Um, so I think it's an incredibly valuable skill to have. It's valuable to understand how different coding languages work, how different frameworks work. Um, and it just means that, from a purely practical perspective, if you've got an idea, you don't have to wait to find your tech person. You can just be your tech person. And especially in the early days for me, it saved me so much time and money instead of worrying about having to hire someone, make sure they were the right fit, and have funding to pay them. I didn't have any of that in the early days. I had to just get a product out, and I am my own engineer. And so I think it's really empowering to be able to. But you also have to play to your strengths, right? And if you're somebody that isn't the most logically minded or mathematically minded, it can be harder to learn. And so if you know that you're an extremely charismatic, charming person and that's your key skill set, then there's no problem with leaning into that and acknowledging that this is an area of weakness. But I'd say at least for me, it was certainly the right decision because I love the logic and the maths that goes into coding. That's why I have a physics degree. But I also love the marketing, the storytelling, the vision, and all of that stuff. And I really think that one of the greatest privileges I have as a founder is I get to do it all. As I said, with that first startup job, the thing I loved most is that I got to learn about everything. And I think being able to code is one of the many great tools that you can have in your arsenal as a founder. It's not the only important tool, but it helps.
Certainly. All right, so we're kind of at the half-hour point here where I like to keep the episodes. So I like to end the podcast interview kind of looking forward towards the future a little bit. We've gone over your entire past, present. So where's Clear headed? What are you guys going to work on in 2025? We're at the start now. What are some of your biggest challenges you're facing?
Yeah, I think that the big two sort of buckets for us are growth and growth. But one growth is consumer focused and one growth is actually clinician focused. So more dermatology, medicine, healthcare focused. On the consumer side, it's pretty straightforward. We've still done no paid marketing. It's all been organic. Last year, with it being the first year of starting marketing, was quite experimental. I got TikTok. And I am still a Gen Z, but I'm an older Gen Z than you are. So I actually didn't use TikTok at all personally.
Yeah.
Um, and I had to kind of figure it out, but it's gained some traction. And actually, just this weekend, the day it was banned in the US, I hit 1 million views on one of my videos. And so
Wow.
I managed from like no background in marketing to figure out how to build up traction. So now I've kind of figured out what works with this no budget approach. I think I might as well continue with no budget.
Yeah.
a bit
Certainly.
less like a headless chicken. I now am a chicken with a head who has some idea of what to do. Still not everything figured out. So that's that on the growth side. We're also planning on launching an ambassador program, more in-person community building events. But on the clinician side, there's a whole dermatology realm to what we're doing. And actually, last year was also transformative for me personally because I went on Accutane, which is an acne medication. And I used Clear throughout that experience to document my photos, my medication dosage. I'd bring it to my appointments. And there was a huge scope for impact within clinical practices. My doctor would get excited every time, being like, wow, it's so nice to see the before and afters and see, all the details and the skincare products you're using in addition to the medication. And so right at the end of last year, we secured partnerships with teledermatology providers in the UK and India, which are two of our biggest markets. We're working on a US teledermatology partnership as well. Also Germany and Indonesia. These are like our 5 biggest markets worldwide. So expanding teledermatology to offer it to our whole community across 5 countries. The app is, just to be clear, is global, but these are our 5 biggest countries, the countries we have the biggest presences in. And then also just being able to integrate Clear's photo sharing into medical practices more. There's another piece on dermatology education. There's not to get too much into the weeds of the industry, but there is a huge diversity issue where doctors in the US and the UK, when they're going through training, they don't actually see skin conditions on skin of color in the textbooks because there's not enough photos. And what this means is, in practice, people who have skin of color are often misdiagnosed when they go in to see a doctor purely because the doctor doesn't recognize what the skin
Yeah.
condition looks like on skin of color.
Yeah.
Because we have a huge data set of
Yeah.
people with skin of color with skin issues. And so, again, at the end of last year, we started getting users to opt in. By default, the pictures are kept private, but users can opt in to share anonymized versions of their face where it's like zoomed in on their cheeks or forehead, just to show like the lesions and have those used in dermatology textbooks. So that's really
Oh,
exciting. Because again, that's a huge scope for impact. And I have been a victim of this. I have been misdiagnosed by a dermatologist who didn't recognize what the skin condition looked like on my skin tone. So yeah, that's another thing I'm really, really excited about. And there's a couple of things. We have a doctor who's on our team working as well to kind of push some of these partnerships ahead. But there's a lot of big business partnerships coming that I'm really, really excited for. And I feel so grateful that I get to build this company and get to see the impact that we're having.
wow. Well, this has certainly been a very, very interesting podcast. I mean, I've learned so much from this one, and it was like phenomenal to hear your story, and it was even more in depth than I really anticipated. I mean, this is really incredible. I'm very glad to hear your story here, and I'm
Oh,
sure
I'm
the
glad.
viewers are as well.
Well, great questions, and yeah, really happy to
Thank
share.
you. All right. Well, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.